either new site owners or people thinking about becoming site owners. And we're just going to get into this podcast. I mean, I don't think we need an intro. This is like a serious discussion. But get your tickets to Save Our Sites. It's going to be in San Diego. We're going to be talking about this kind of stuff during the conference. I think you can still get your early bird by the time you watch or listen to this. We're in like an environment now of like entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs are like, there's a spirit of entrepreneurship, and some of it is forced. Like the industry is kind of forcing a lot of people that have been displaced to want to look at site ownership, amongst other things. So this is like a real questions. I'm a real site owner. If this is your first time watching, thank you. I've been running sites for 21 years now. And I got a collection of some of the best and most frequently asked questions. And I honestly haven't looked at them. I just kind of got them and put them in this outline so I could read them. But the first one is, and I kind of categorize them into three different types. So one of them is like reality check. The other section is underestimating the success factors. And then the third one is the future and, there's actually four. The future frontier and the personal toll it takes on you. And then the fourth one is the unspoken truth. So let me just start with the questions, because there's no real way to like frame this properly other than just getting into it. So, the internet talks about startup costs being anywhere from $12,000 to $35,000. What's one of the biggest hidden costs you had to deal with that you couldn't have planned for? So where the internet gets this from, because you can actually start a site for zero or very close to zero. 12,000 is a lot. 35,000. I think when people start Googling, they start getting like these random numbers thrown at them. If you're paying yourself, the biggest cost is supporting yourself, the entrepreneur, the business owner, because presumably you are leaving your job to start this, so you don't have an income anymore. Or if you're not, then this doesn't apply. But the biggest cost could be rent. A lot of people are not able to secure space within their PI's private practice, and that puts immediate pressure on you to perform, and to perform quickly. And what happens when we're under pressure? We start making bad decisions. We start trying to cut corners and make things happen quicker, and we just get extra stress that we don't need. So I prefer, and I've done it all. I've rented office space before I've even had a study, and then I've done the opposite, where I've partnered with a PI and was allowed to work in their office while I got my first couple of studies going, and then I moved on. So the biggest hidden cost might be your own pay. Like, how are you going to fund your own personal bills, right? That's the thing people don't think about the most. They think about, what is this going to cost to start my site? Well, it could cost zero. Like, the variable is you. But then how are you going to pay your mortgage? How are you going to pay your bills? Presumably, you're going to be living off of savings. So do you count this savings into this startup fee? And I know some people do and some people don't. But most people are going to need, a substantial amount of money to cover their monthly bills for themselves. Forget about the site. You can do the site for relatively free. Our first cost when we started the site, Yuma Clinical Trials here, was the website, which is like $1,000 a year. A drug storage cabinet. I still remember Jaime and I went to Lowe's and bought one. That was $400. And a desk, because our PI let us use his office, but we needed a desk. Like, literally, that was it. That's all we paid for. We got our first study a few months later. We got a startup fee. We got another study really shortly thereafter. We got a startup fee. Then we hired a coordinator. And then we had to buy more furniture, like another desk, a chair. So the hidden cost is your personal costs, because you can bootstrap the hell out of your site where it doesn't cost you almost anything. The second question: many people want to do this from their existing private practice or a private practice of a PI they partner with. What's the most significant challenge in transitioning from patient care mindset to a research-driven one? So this is from the physicians out there. I actually did a presentation yesterday. You'll see the vlog soon. In front of a large health system. There was probably 11 providers in this room, where I pitched them on the benefits of doing research and like the practical aspects of doing research. So the challenge in transitioning from patient care mindset to research-driven one is non-existent. There shouldn't be any challenge, because a clinician should remain a clinician. Just because you have a private practice and now you do research does not mean you need to radically transform who you are or how you think about your patients. Ideally, you should have your patient's best interest in mind as a private practice physician and as a principal investigator physician. That is the fundamentals of good clinical practice. So there is no mindset needed to be shifted. What needs to change, what you need to figure out, is who's going to be your study coordinator. And now we're getting into where some of that startup costs are going to. Because the reason I started my site for very little money is because I was the coordinator. I didn't need to hire somebody. I was the coordinator for the first year, a little less, like first 8 months. And I didn't need to hire anyone, but if I were a physician running my private practice, I'm probably selecting my smartest MA that I have, my most ambitious medical assistant or nursing assistant, just somebody who's already working for me that's sharp. You know who that person is if you're running a private practice. That person needs to start doing research. And it may not initially be full-time, because you're not going to have full-time work when you're starting out. But once you get a study or two, it becomes full-time work. And so that's where the mindset has to shift. Like, I need to take this person and have them do research, and I need to replace, let's say they're your lead MA, or maybe they're your front desk person. For me, I'm not a physician, but I was running a private practice as well. And for me, the employee that I found was the front desk person, who was basically the heart and soul of that private practice. So what we did is she actually brought in her niece, who she trained, to take over her role as front desk, billing assistant, literally everything for the private practice. And she transitioned to coordinator, and she was still in the same office, so we're able to kind of do both when we need to. If you need to put out a fire in the private practice, this is a metaphorical fire, but maybe an actual fire, and then still do research as a coordinator, she can do that because she was there. So that's where the mindset needs to come. It's not really a mindset. It's more of a practical or a tactical action that you have to do. Another question I got: a major focus for new sites is just getting a sponsor to say yes for the first time. What's the most difficult conversation you had trying to land your first trial, and how did you finally convince them you were the right choice? The first study I got here in Yuma about 4.5 years ago was for an internal medicine private practice physician. It was a dermatology study. And you might be thinking, well, why would a derm sponsor want to work with a internal medicine private practice? Because that sponsor had a very hard time. It was a very difficult study, and that sponsor had a very hard time enrolling patients for the study. And so as long as I can convince them that my PI, who has Yuma's largest private practice for internal medicine, had a good amount of those patients that we can screen and enroll, we were considered for the job. Now, it doesn't hurt that I have a lot of years of experience being a coordinator, so I put myself as a coordinator, even though my PI was relatively research naive. Now, he did do some studies back in medical school that we were able to put on his resume, but ultimately it boiled down to could he get the patients, and was I a competent enough coordinator? And let's not sugarcoat it. This was not an easy study. This was a hard study. The easy studies, sponsors don't need to take risks. If it's a relatively easy study with an easy IE criteria, chances are that study's not going to have problems with patient recruitment or patient accrual. And because of that, they're not taking chances for brand new investigators. I think they should, but they won't. So probably you're just going to have to keep reaching out to a bunch of sponsors. This is where you're going to have to reach out to colleagues in your industry. This is why it pays to go to things like Save Our Sites and network with other site owners and try sharing study leads with other site owners, because site owners know, hey, I have this study. They're very behind on recruitment. I can put in a good word for you if you want. And then you get the study that way. So your first study is probably not going to be an easy study, but that's not the point. The point is you're getting a study, you're getting experience, you're getting a startup fee, you're getting the opportunity. If you have staff, they're learning the process. They have to go through a site selection visit. They have to go through a site initiation visit. They have to go through study startup regulatory. They have to create the source. They have to build the SOPs. You're going to get a lot of your infrastructure taken care of with that first study. So action, just do it. I'm always dropping books on this show. John D. Rockefeller's letters to his son is amazing. You will not be able to put down the book, and it's a super easy read. And in chapter 4, I know it's chapter 4 because I just read it the other night, it talks about action. He prefers action over stagnation. And getting your first study, getting a study, even though it's not ideal, even though it's like not a best one, like my study had like 10-hour visits. Like we were figuring out ways to do it. Just take it. Try to at least get one patient randomized. Try to at least show the sponsor you're putting in some effort, and that's it. So that's what we did. That's what happened. It's not easy to get your first study, but you're going to get a study that's not that easy, and you're going to have a lot of sponsors rejecting you before one of them says yes. And that one that says yes is going to be a pretty desperate one. But then they get easier. Trust me. Another question. A major sponsor suddenly pulls the trial from you or runs out of money, which major sponsors don't run out of money. Major sponsors pool trials. Small biotechs run out of money. I actually had both of these scenarios happen at my site. Most recently, I had a major sponsor give us a really good study. I mean, this was going to be a high six-figure study. We were overhired just to wait for this study. Now, thankfully, we had other studies coming in that justified our being overhired. I still think we are still slightly overhired, but we are growing, so it's okay. But this study, last minute, sponsor canceled the study. And this was a major sponsor. And this was after 6 months of getting the study, doing the startup regulatory, having the imaging vendors get trained, doing the source. I mean, everything. Luckily, we got our startup fee, which was significant, but it was a big disappointment. Now, how do we recover from that? You just do. I mean, what's the alternative? You go out of business? No, that's not a good alternative for you. I don't want you to even think those thoughts. If you had to cut people's hours, do what you got to do and let them know, hey, we were really banking on this study. Unfortunately, we don't have another one. Now, I didn't have to pull people's hours because we had other studies in the pipeline, which is why I still default towards saying yes to studies. And I have a bunch of specialists now that have joined my team as opposed to in the first year where I only had one and then two. I had a dermatologist right after the internal med. So having a diversity of providers, of physicians, of therapeutic areas is certainly helpful. And there's certainly been cases where my gut instinct was to say no to a study. We're too busy. We don't want that study. It's not exactly our bread and butter, because we have these other studies starting up that are. And then a study like this gets pulled, and you're glad you didn't say no. So action over stagnation, yes over no, especially in your early years as a site owner. Now, when you're already recruiting patients and you're not getting paid, here's a word of caution for you guys. With the big sponsors, you don't have to worry about anything. With the small biotechs, especially if they're not publicly traded, especially if they're foreign, especially if you never heard of them, especially if you go to their website and it's like, it looks weird, be skeptical. Don't enroll a single patient until you get your startup fee. Now, there are times when I break this rule, which is right now. We're in this situation because it's just one of several studies. I'm not putting all my eggs in that study. And we're screening. Essentially, we have another study with the same indication starting soon. So even if we're essentially pre-screening for that other study with this study, but if the patients end up liking this study, they're obviously going to stay in it. We do what's best for the patient and what they want. But when you're skeptical about a sponsor, don't enroll a single patient until you get your startup fee. And then I wouldn't randomize more than 2 until you start seeing that they're honoring their contract. Meaning, if it says monthly payments and you have study visits, make sure you're getting your payments. They may not always be monthly, but if 3 months go by and you still haven't received the payment for your study visits and they're not responding to your emails, I would contact that study director and say, hey, no monitors allowed until we get paid. We don't know what's going on. Some of these biotechs do struggle for funding. Now, rates are being cut as we speak. Yesterday, the Fed cut rates by 25 basis points. I think they'll be cutting more throughout the year. So financing should get easier in theory for these biotechs, but these problems are still going to happen. So that's how you protect your site from financial fallouts from sponsors. Now, segment 2, underestimated success factors. So these are trends like AI. There's surprisingly a lot of questions around AI, e-clinical systems. Shout out to Creo and Inato and Patient Ace, sponsors of this show. And the last one, Patient Ace, is Mike. I'm one of the co-founders. You got to be scrappy to survive. You got to balance, especially when you're a startup. Do I pay for this? And what's my ROI? This is why I like things like Inato. It's free. This is why I like things like Patient Ace. It's bare bones, no frills, like minimal cost. And this is why I like Creo even, which is considered one of the more pricey e-source e-reg vendors, but they have everything and you only pay for what you use. So if you don't want the record retrieval, or you don't want e-consent, or you don't want the voice over internet protocol phone number, you don't need to have all that. You can just use the bare minimums. So the first question I got here, looking back on your first few trials, what's one specific thing that you did that you believed helped deliver a win for the sponsor, even without a long track record? And this was a osteoarthritis study that I had. It was my 3rd study I had. And the one thing I did that delivered value for the sponsor was we randomized patients. That's it. We did what we said we were going to do, and we paid attention to the details. Meaning, if you agreed to randomize patients, we randomized them. Number 2, you focused on the quality. Did those patients actually qualify? You'd be surprised. Sites randomize patients that don't even qualify. It ends up being a deviation later. God forbid the FDA audits them. Hopefully the monitors catch it before. But that's serious protocol deviations, safety jeopardizing deviations. So very simple. Randomize patients and don't jeopardize patient safety, and don't jeopardize the data integrity. Meaning follow the protocol and good clinical practice. That's it. It's not a high bar. Like, it's simple stuff. Second question here. The myth is that you need a massive database of patients to start. What's one patient engagement or recruitment strategy you used to build a patient database from scratch that was a complete game changer for you? I love this question because I partnered my first PI. Actually, all of our PIs have big private practices. All of them. The cardiologist does, the internal medicine does, the pulmonologist does, the dermatologist does, the psychiatrist does. That doesn't mean they're going to join our study. Like, all their patients are going to say yes. You're still depending on those busy providers to screen patients or to refer you the patients, first of all, so you can screen them. Like, having a big database of patients doesn't mean anything if you're not able to screen them. So what we did really early, we had to do weekly touch points with our clinicians. Hey, doc, any new patients for this study? And then we go to our other doctor. Hey, any new ones for this one? Oh, and then they'll tell you, well, I haven't seen any, but my nurse practitioner did. Maybe go talk to her. So what ends up happening is you're chasing down all these busy providers, which is good, but it becomes a full-time job, and you need somebody to do that. This is why we have patient recruiters now at our site, or admins. But this is why things like Patient Ace are so valuable. So Patient Ace will do the Facebook and Instagram advertising for you at a low cost and send you qualified leads. It automates the workflow. At this point, because of AI, the patients can actually self-schedule themselves passively for screening visits. We've done hour-long videos with other sites using Patient Ace. I don't want to plug it too much, but for me, that's been a game changer. And then when you supplement your PI's private practice, which, by the way, it is still the best quality of leads, is your own PI's private practice. But they don't flow that quickly just because everyone's so busy. And we have some PIs that say, yeah, go through our database, you can call them yourself, but those patients still don't trust you like they trust their doctor. So you're really requiring a face-to-face from that clinician with their patient. And then you have some PIs, some investigators tell us, no, I'm not comfortable you going through my database. I will do it. So then it becomes a touch points with them. Like, you just have to follow up with those providers. Whereas something like Patient Ace, you set your daily budget that you want to spend, $10 a day, $5 a day, and you'll get like 8 leads a day, qualified leads. Now, not all of those leads are going to answer, but 1 or 2 of them are going to talk to you. 3 of them, maybe more, depends on the indication, are actually going to come in. So that's consistent versus variable. And you need both, because the variable leads are actually better quality than the people off the street clicking ads, but those are consistent, and you can control those. And so this is what I think in regards to patient databases. Now, many people think technology only adds complexity and costs. What's one piece of technology you adopted early that saved you more time or more money than you ever expected? I'm not going to plug Patient Ace anymore because that'd be cheesy, but that would be an obvious answer. But Inato is a biz dev tool that we use that's free. After my PIs got experience, it's a game changer. All right. Now, another one I use that's not a sponsor is Monday. Monday.com. It is I wish I would have used this from day one. It is a project management tool. They have a free product, or they have a $10 a month product, I believe, per user. Game changer. Because now you can manage, if you have some staff, if you have specific tasks that you just don't want to be texting and emailing people constantly, you have it in this workflow management system where everyone can see what needs to be done. It's like a to-do list that can be automated. You can even plug in emails from staff to get forwarded to certain workspaces. It's amazing. I would check it out. Low cost solution, even free. So there's a couple of them for you. Can you share an aha moment where a patient's feedback or a seemingly small change to your workflow fundamentally changed how you run your site for the better? We had one study where we were doing everything we could to get patients screened during a short period of time. Some patients were only available to come in on the weekends. We let the staff work on the weekends and then take a day off during the week. And that was an aha moment for me because you're not really supposed to screen patients on the weekends. Labs don't really go out. But you could break up the visit. Hey, come in to get screened. Then come in for your blood work whenever you can. We made it work. So that was one aha moment where we're like doing things in an unorthodox way. We're also doing it in a way where patients are not able to have more flexibility. Like we want to give the patients more flexibility. So that's an aha moment. As far as like patients' feedback is concerned, when we moved out of our PI's private practice into a bigger space, new patients thought that was like a kind of a sketchy location because it was off the beaten path. So we had to make a website, or we had to make a video tour of our new facility for our website. So any new patient that would get scheduled to come in, they also get a link of that video tour. Say, hey, by the way, this is our site. Patients have told us that video has helped them feel more relieved and more secured about their decision to come in. So that was an easy aha moment. We actually hired videographer Daniel. Everybody knows Daniel from Save Our Sites, and we did that video there. The future frontier and your personal toll. All right? Now, this could be a business. This could be a lifestyle. It could be both. Early in my career, this was a lifestyle. I was just trying to figure out, is this a real thing? Now, with Yuma Clinical Trials, this is a business. I want to build a scalable business that becomes a site network. And so it could be both. It depends on you, the owner. So AI is moving from a buzzword to a practical tool. Over the next 3 to 5 years, what's the single most significant way you predict AI will change the day-to-day operations of your site? I really do think it's in two things. It's in patient recruitment. We're already seeing patients coming in passively for screening visits, for pre-screening visits without any human interactions. That's big. That's only going to get better. And then things like data entry and even, I think, query resolutions because of companies like Gleam that I've interviewed on this podcast and others like that are taking away a lot of the grunt work from the sites, from data entry, which is like a very manual, tedious process. I think that's going to completely change in 3 years easily. Another question, what's the hardest part about keeping up with the rapid pace of change in this industry, the new technologies, the shifting regulations, and what's the personal toll of that constant evolution? You need staff that are willing to change things. So, the more experienced your staff, the more resistant they become as well. So you got to always have fresh blood in there. The newest people are willing to do anything you want because to them it's not a paradigm shift. The more experienced staff, sometimes they become more resistant. Well, this is how we've always done things. Why should we change it? So that's the hardest part about keeping up with all this stuff. It's not the regulations. Most of these vendors kind of take care of that. Ideally, you should be asking them before you implement any of these technologies, how are you on the regulatory compliance side? Is it validated? They should have some language. If they don't, that's a red flag that they're too early on in the process. This is a good question. If you could go back to the day you first opened your site, what's the one piece of advice you'd give your past self knowing what you know now? I actually think I didn't make any major mistakes. This time around, because this was not my first site, I would have implemented Monday early on, and I probably would have tried to get more specialists even faster. But other than that, I think we did it the right way. Now, if I go back to my very first site 21 years ago, I would have expanded outside of psychiatry quickly, because my first site, and really for my first 10 years of doing research, was all psychiatric based. I didn't do my first non-psych study until an opioid-induced constipation study. That was actually 7 years later, but I should have really diversified faster. And I've learned that psych studies are actually really challenging. That you can make a lot of money on psych studies, but they're very challenging. And it's better to, in my opinion, have more of a diversification when it comes to your study offerings that you can do. Now, the unspoken truth. We've talked about a lot so far. Here's a question here. Maybe this is the final question that we could wrap this up with. There's a lot of pressure to present a flawless site. What's an unspoken truth about the clinical research industry that you believe people need to hear? This is a good philosophical question the first time I actually saw it. In my early days, I tried to act like I was an academic medical center, when in reality we were a mom and pop private practice that does research. Now, I think there was some benefits to that because it forced me to think like an organization. One of the first books I read was the E-Myth Revisited, which is must read for sites. Building systems so that you can scale your site. I think the biggest mistake that I made early on, or the unspoken truth, is not owning your reality. So I actually did this well when we moved to Yuma with this site. It's because I'm older and wiser. We understood our PIs knew, but we also understood he had the biggest private practice in Yuma. And then I was an experienced coordinator. So we focus on those two things. The sponsors are going to know when they come to your site and they don't see any other lab kits or anything like that, you might be a newer site. Now you can try to stage it and bring lab kits from if you have colleagues, I don't know. There's people that do all kinds of stuff. They bring ECG machines. I mean, do what you got to do, but own your own truth. Talk to the sponsor when they come to your site. Just be upfront. Hey, we don't have that much experience at this site, but this is my background as the coordinator. This is our PI's experience with private practice. Your indication is very difficult because remember, the first study you're probably going to get is a difficult, challenging protocol. Your study is very difficult, but luckily for you, we actually have these patients. And I know we can enroll and give them a realistic number. I know we could at least enroll 2, maybe even 4. And even show them, you got to de-identify the patient's info, but show them the database somehow and say, we already have them. We can enroll them. I'm a coordinator. I have experience. So the point of all this is lead with your best foot forward, not with your flaws. And I see a lot of site owners going one of two different things. They're either bullshitting the entire time, their PI has no experience, their coordinator has no experience, they've never done a study in their life, and they try to act like they know what they're doing by regurgitating some things they learned from these podcasts or the book me and Chris wrote, The Comprehensive Guide to Clinical Research. Or they go the opposite way and they're just too humble. We haven't done studies before, and this will be the first time, so we don't know how it's going to go. While there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that, that's not the message you want to convey when a CRA is at your site wanting to select you. Now, you can own your weaknesses, but I wouldn't lead with my weaknesses. your weakness is eventually going to come up. These site selection visits are like 2 hours sometimes. But you want to lead with your strengths without bullshitting. And there's an art to doing that. And there's a balance between not faking that you don't have any flaws, but also not leading with, not hiding your strengths. And there's a balance to that I think comes with time, and it comes naturally to some people. This is why I think having a sales background is good. But you don't want to bullshit too much either. And these CRAs are going to know when they come to your site. So lead with your best foot forward, but also be upfront about your downsides, but then immediately offer solutions for how you're going to mitigate potential risks on the sponsor's downsides. Put yourself in their shoes. Why should they give your site that study if you never had experience on that indication before? Like, just that's their objection, even if they're not outright saying it. And you should lead with the solution before anything else. And that's it. That's it for the podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Hopefully this helps. These are some unfiltered. I never really seen them before. I just kind of aggregated them all together. And then I had the AI kind of organize them into coherent segments. But let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out. And I'm done. Hey, if you guys like that kind of content, make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Stay tuned for more videos.